What if the reason you have not yet made more in a single year than most people make in their entire lifetime has nothing to do with opportunity, intelligence, luck, background, economy, or timing, and everything to do with a silent decision you made long ago about who you are allowed to become? Sit with that question, because it is not meant to inspire you, it is meant to expose you. Long before money ever enters your hands, long before success takes form in the visible world, a private agreement is signed inside the mind. That agreement sets the upper limit of identity, desire, courage, and endurance you believe you are entitled to express. Napoleon Hill understood this with unsettling clarity. He knew that wealth is never an accident and poverty is never a mystery. Both are outcomes of invisible causes operating with mathematical precision in the inner world. If you are to make more in 2026 than most people make in their entire life, you must confront the reality that your current results are not happening to you. They are happening from you. Most people move through life unconsciously negotiating with limitation. They speak the language of ambition but think in the grammar of fear. They desire abundance, yet emotionally rehearse loss. They claim they want freedom, yet cling to the familiar prison of predictable outcomes. Hill taught that definiteness of purpose is the starting point of all achievement. But he also warned that most people never experience definiteness because they are terrified of responsibility. To define a purpose is to declare war on excuse. It is to announce to your subconscious mind that wandering is over. The moment you decide to earn, build, create, or become something extraordinary, the mind immediately retaliates with doubt, fatigue, distraction, and rational delay. This resistance is not a sign that something is wrong. It is evidence that something real has been declared. The masses live by hope. The disciplined few live by decision. Hope waits. Decision commands. When Hill spoke of burning desire, he did not mean casual wanting. He meant an obsession so intense it reorganizes perception itself. A burning desire is not emotional excitement. It is emotional ownership. It is when the goal becomes so internalized that not achieving it feels more painful than any sacrifice required to pursue it. Most people want wealth as a comfort. The uncommon individual wants it as an expression of identity. That difference alone separates entire lifetimes of results. To make more in a single year than most make in decades requires the willingness to become psychologically unreasonable. Reasonableness is the religion of mediocrity. It keeps people safe, accepted, and poor. Hill emphasized faith not as blind belief, but as a cultivated mental state. Faith is the ability to think as though success is inevitable before evidence appears. This is not self-deception. It is self-direction. The subconscious mind does not respond to logic. It responds to emotionalized thought. Repeated thoughts charged with certainty harden into belief. And belief dictates behavior even when the conscious mind is uncertain. Autosuggestion is the mechanism through which this programming occurs. Every thought you allow to repeat becomes instruction. Every inner conversation you rehearse becomes architecture. The mind is always listening. It never stops recording. Most people unknowingly hypnotize themselves into limitation through careless self-talk, borrowed opinions, inherited fears, and socially acceptable doubt. To out-earn lifetimes in a single year, you must become ruthless with mental input. Not violent, not arrogant, but precise. Hill taught that the mind thrives on order. Discipline is not restriction, it is liberation from chaos. Self-discipline means you do not negotiate with impulses that contradict your purpose. You do not wait to feel motivated. You act because action is the language through which faith communicates with reality. Every disciplined act reinforces identity. Every undisciplined act fractures it. Over time, these fractures become self-distrust, and self-distrust is the true currency of failure. Fear mastery is not the elimination of fear, but the refusal to obey it. Hill identified fear as the most destructive force in the human mind, not because it exists, but because it paralyzes decision. Fear delays. Fear complicates. Fear disguises itself as prudence and patience while silently eroding momentum. The fear of poverty, criticism, loss, and inadequacy keeps millions locked in cycles of preparation without execution. The tragic irony is that the fear of losing security is what guarantees lifelong insecurity. Those who make extraordinary income compress time by acting before comfort arrives. They move while afraid, decide while uncertain, and persist while misunderstood. Imagination, as Hill described it, is the workshop of the mind. Everything that now exists as wealth once existed as an image sustained in thought. Passive imagination dreams. Creative imagination commands. When you deliberately visualize outcomes with emotional intensity, you engage forces beyond conscious reasoning. You instruct the subconscious to seek pathways, connections, and opportunities invisible to ordinary perception. This is not mysticism, it is alignment. The mind begins to filter reality differently when it knows what it is looking for. Opportunities that once went unnoticed suddenly appear obvious. This is why two people can stand in the same environment and experience completely different realities. Decision is the rarest quality among adults. Hill observed that successful people make decisions quickly and change them slowly, while unsuccessful people do the opposite. Indecision is not neutrality, it is a decision to remain controlled by circumstance. Every delay reinforces the belief that you are not ready, not worthy, not capable. Over time, indecision becomes identity. To decide is to sever alternate futures. That is why it feels heavy. But weight is not danger. Weight is responsibility, and responsibility is the gateway to power. The year you decide to make more than most make in a lifetime is the year you stop asking what is possible and start declaring what is required. Persistence is where philosophy becomes destiny. Talent initiates, desire ignites, but persistence finishes. Hill knew that most people quit not because they cannot continue, but because they misinterpret resistance as a sign to stop. Resistance is the toll paid to enter uncommon territory. Every major breakthrough is guarded by a period of apparent stagnation. Those who retreat here live ordinary lives. Those who endure pass through to extraordinary ones. Persistence rewires the subconscious to expect victory. Each act of continuation, despite fatigue, sends a message. I am not governed by emotion. I am governed by purpose. The invisible mental forces Hill described are always operating, whether you acknowledge them or not. Thought blended with emotion becomes belief. Belief dictates action. Action produces results. Results reinforce belief. This loop either compounds power or compounds limitation. There is no neutral cycle. You are either ascending or decaying psychologically. To compress wealth into a single year requires compressing identity first. You must think faster, decide firmer, endure longer, and detach from social validation. The masses will not understand you because they are not meant to. Their confusion is confirmation that you are moving beyond inherited limits. As 2026 approaches, the question is not whether the opportunity exists. Opportunity is abundant and indifferent. The question is whether you are prepared to meet it with a mind trained for command rather than consumption. Most people consume information, motivation, and inspiration without integration. The disciplined individual consumes selectively and applies relentlessly. Knowledge unused becomes noise. Action imperfect becomes momentum. Momentum creates confidence, and confidence attracts resources. Wealth is drawn to those who demonstrate the psychological capacity to manage it. This year will not reward effort alone. It will reward alignment. It will reward those who have decided who they are before the world decides for them. The inner laws Hill revealed are not suggestions, they are conditions. To violate them is to accept average outcomes. To obey them is to assume uncommon responsibility. You are not here to survive another year. You are here to dominate one internally before it manifests externally. The mind you bring into 2026 will determine whether it becomes another chapter of repetition or the year that collapses decades of limitation into a single irreversible breakthrough. The moment a person commits internally to making more in a single year than most make across an entire lifetime, something subtle but violent begins to occur inside the psyche. It is not excitement, it is not confidence. It is pressure, pressure born from contradiction. The old identity senses its impending extinction, and it does not surrender quietly. Napoleon Hill understood this internal conflict deeply. He knew that every meaningful leap in results requires a psychological death long before any external gain is visible. The old habits, the old emotional reactions, the old tolerance for delay and comfort begin to feel unbearable. This discomfort is not a warning. It is a signal that transformation has begun. Most people misunderstand the nature of internal resistance. They assume resistance means they are doing something wrong when in reality, resistance appears precisely when the mind is being asked to operate beyond its conditioned limits. The subconscious mind is loyal to familiarity, not truth. It protects patterns, not potential. When you attempt to think, act, or desire at a level far beyond your past experience, the subconscious responds with anxiety, procrastination, distraction, and fat. These are not flaws, they are defensive mechanisms. Hill taught that mastery begins when you stop negotiating with these signals and start commanding through them. Burning desire, when authentic, destabilizes the nervous system at first. It demands energy, focus, and sacrifice. It exposes how much time has been wasted in mental drift. This is why most people dilute their desires. They prefer manageable wants over consuming obsessions. A diluted desire does not disrupt lifestyle, relationships, or identity, but it also does not create extraordinary outcomes. To compress decades of income into a single year, desire must become intolerant of delay. It must become so emotionally charged that inaction feels like self-betrayal. At this level, discipline stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like relief. Faith, as Hill described it, is not optimism. Optimism hopes circumstances will improve. Faith assumes internal authority regardless of circumstances. It is a posture of certainty that does not require permission from evidence. This does not mean ignoring reality. It means refusing to let temporary appearances dictate permanent beliefs. Faith is built through repetition of controlled thought. Every morning, the mind must be reminded who is in charge. Every evening, it must be reviewed and corrected. Without this daily governance, the mind defaults to cultural programming, fear-based narratives, and inherited limitations. Autosuggestion is not affirmation spoken casual. Why? It is deliberate mental conditioning. The subconscious accepts repetition as truth, regardless of accuracy. This is why people raised in limitation often reproduce it unconsciously. They have rehearsed it emotionally for years. To reverse this, repetition must be paired with feeling. Words without emotion do nothing. Emotion without direction creates chaos. But emotion aligned with definite purpose creates belief. When belief hardens, behavior follows effortlessly. The person who earns extraordinary income in compressed time is not forcing themselves to act. They have become someone for whom such action is natural. Self-discipline is the visible expression of internal order. Hill emphasized that without discipline, desire becomes fantasy. Discipline is not harshness, it is clarity. It is the refusal to scatter energy across trivial impulses. Every distraction indulged reinforces the identity of someone who cannot be trusted with large outcomes. Every disciplined act reinforces self-respect, and self-respect is the foundation of confidence. Confidence is not loud, it is calm. It is the quiet certainty that you will do what you said you would do long after motivation disappears. Fear mastery requires brutal honesty. Fear does not vanish through avoidance, it grows there. Fear shrinks only when confronted repeatedly without obedience. The fear of failure, the fear of criticism, the fear of success itself all share a common root, fear of self-judgment. People are not afraid of losing money as much as they are afraid of losing identity. To aim for extraordinary results means risking being wrong publicly. It means risking ridicule. Hill taught that criticism is the tax paid by those who refuse to remain average. If you are not being misunderstood, you are not moving fast enough. Imagination must be trained with precision. Daydreaming is not creation. Vague images do not instruct the subconscious. Clear, repeated, emotionally charged visualization does. You must see the outcome not as fantasy, but as inevitability. The mind cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one when emotion is present. This is how athletes rehearse performance and how leaders rehearse decisions before they are required. When imagination is disciplined, it becomes rehearsal for destiny. Decision is where power consolidates. Until a decision is made, Energy leaks in all directions. The moment a decision is made, energy aligns. Hill observed that most people live entire lives without ever truly deciding anything. They drift from obligation to obligation, reacting rather than commanding. The individual who makes more in a single year than most make in a lifetime has decided not only what they want, but who they will no longer be. This is the hardest part. Letting go of the familiar self feels like loss, but it is the only path to expansion. Persistence is the final filter. It eliminates those who want the outcome without paying the psychological prick. E. Persistence is not stubbornness. It is intelligent endurance. It is the ability to remain emotionally neutral during delay. Delay is not denial. Delay is testing. Hill taught that every failure carries the seed of equivalent advantage, but only those who persist long enough are positioned to extract it. Most people quit inches from transformation because the final resistance feels indistinguishable from impossibility. The invisible forces governing wealth do not respond to need. They respond to readiness. Need repels. Readiness attracts. Readiness is demonstrated through consistency, discipline, and internal order. Money flows toward those who have proven they can manage thought before they attempt to manage resources. Chaos in the mind produces chaos in results. Order in the mind produces leverage in results. To make more in 2026 than most make in their entire life is not a financial goal. It is a psychological reorganization. It requires rejecting the collective agreement about time, effort, and reward. Most people trade hours for income and accept linear growth. The uncommon individual trades value for leverage and compresses time. This requires thinking in systems, decisions, and outcomes rather than effort and exhaustion. Hill taught that riches come not from hard labor, but from applied intelligence. Intelligence directed by purpose multiplies itself. The mind must be trained to tolerate scale. Many people sabotage success unconsciously because they have not expanded their internal capacity to receive it. Sudden growth feels unsafe to an untrained psyche. This is why self-image must be elevated before results arrive. You must become familiar with the idea of large outcomes before they occur. Familiarity removes shock. Shock produces self-sabotage. Calm expectation produces stability. As the year approaches, the internal conversation becomes decisive. Either you allow the old voice of caution to dominate, or you install a new voice of command. Hill believed that the mind must be ruled or it will be ruled. There is no neutral state. Every day you either strengthen your authority over thought or surrender it to circumstance. The difference between those who compress wealth and those who stretch effort across decades is not intelligence. It is governance. This is the silent work no one applauds. No audience watches the mental battles fought in isolation. No one sees the moments where impulse is denied, comfort is refused, and clarity is chosen over relief. But this unseen labor determines visible outcomes with ruthless accuracy. When the internal foundation is laid correctly, external results follow with almost disturbing speed. The world will tell you to be patient, reasonable, realistic. Hill would tell you to be precise, decisive, and internally disciplined. Reasonableness keeps people average. Precision makes them dangerous to limitation. As 2026 draws nearer, the question is not whether you can make more than most make in their lifetime. The question is whether you are willing to endure the internal restructuring required to become someone for whom such a result is inevitable. There comes a point in the internal journey where the mind no longer resists loudly but quietly attempts to seduce you back into comfort. This is the most dangerous phase. Napoleon Hill warned indirectly but unmistakably that when the conscious decision has been made and the initial surge of intensity fades, a subtler enemy appears. It is not fear screaming at you to stop. It is logic whispering that you can slow down. It is reason suggesting moderation. It is the voice that says you have already changed enough. This is where most ambitions die, not in chaos, but in calm. The mind seeks equilibrium, and equilibrium is fatal to extraordinary outcomes. To make more in a single year than most people make in an entire lifetime requires sustained internal tension. Not stress, but tension between who you have been and who you are becoming. Hill understood that growth is uncomfortable because it stretches identity faster than evidence can catch up. The subconscious craves confirmation. It wants proof before belief. But belief must come first, or proof never arrives. This reversal of cause and effect is where the average mind collapses. It insists on seeing before committing. The disciplined mind commits in order to see. The law of definiteness of purpose does not merely ask you to know what you want. It demands that you organize your entire mental life around it. Every thought either aligns with purpose or weakens it. There is no neutral thinking. Idle thoughts are not harmless. They dilute intensity. Hill emphasized that drift is the enemy of greatness. Drift is not laziness. Drift is unconscious living. It is reacting rather than directing, absorbing rather than choosing. A drifting mind cannot accumulate wealth because wealth requires direction. Direction requires decision. Decision requires clarity. And clarity requires discipline. Most people believe they think, but they merely react. They believe they choose, but they merely respond. To compress decades of results into a single year, you must become acutely aware of your internal environment. What thoughts recur when you are tired? What images appear when you imagine success? What emotions surface when you consider responsibility at scale? These are not random. They are indicators of conditioning. Hill taught that the subconscious mind is a faithful servant, but a dangerous master. It executes instructions flawlessly, but it does not question them. If you have instructed it with fear, it will produce hesitation. If you have instructed it with doubt, it will produce delay. If you instruct it with certainty, it will produce action. The discipline of autosuggestion becomes more critical as the goal expands. Small goals can tolerate inconsistent thinking. Massive goals cannot. The mind must be saturated with the desired outcome until it becomes familiar, then expected, then inevitable. This repetition is not glamorous, it feels mechanical. But mechanics govern outcomes, not inspiration. Hill understood that emotion fuels repetition, and repetition builds belief. Belief then operates automatically without conscious effort. This is when action becomes natural rather than forced. At this stage, emotional mastery becomes non-negotiable. You cannot afford emotional volatility when pursuing compressed outcomes. High income achieved rapidly requires stability under pressure. The world will test your composure through delays, criticism, unexpected obstacles, and sudden responsibility. If emotions dictate behavior, inconsistency follows. Inconsistency destroys momentum. Hill taught that self-control is the foundation of leadership, and leadership of self precedes leadership of circumstance. The person who cannot control their reactions cannot control results. Fear evolves as ambition grows. Early fears are obvious. Failure, embarrassment, rejection. Later fears are more subtle. Fear of outgrowing relationships, fear of responsibility, fear of isolation at the top. These fears rarely announce themselves. They disguise themselves as concerns about balance, happiness, or morality. Hill was clear that success requires separation before it creates contribution. There is a period where you must walk alone mentally, even if surrounded physically. The need for approval must be burned out of the psyche. Approval seeking is incompatible with decisive action. Imagination now shifts from vision to strategy. It is no longer enough to see the outcome. You must see yourself executing under pressure, making decisions quickly, recovering from setbacks without emotional collapse. You must imagine obstacles not as threats, but as confirmations that you are operating at the edge of your former limits. The disciplined imagination rehearses response, not just reward. It prepares the nervous system for intensity so that when intensity arrives, it is met with familiarity rather than shock. Decision-making becomes sharper here. Hill noted that those who achieve extraordinary success do not waste energy revisiting settled choices. They move forward with what they have decided and adjust tactically, not fundamentally. Indecision drains energy more than effort ever could. It creates mental noise, second-guessing, and hesitation. To move at the speed required to compress wealth, decisions must be made with incomplete information and executed with full commitment. Waiting for certainty is waiting for failure. Persistence at this level is no longer about continuing action. It is about continuing belief. The outer world may lag behind the inner transformation. Results may not yet reflect the internal upgrade. This delay is the final test of faith. Hill taught that many people quit not because they lack ability, but because they lose belief when results are delayed. They misinterpret silence as rejection, but silence is oft an alignment happening beneath the surface. The mind must remain steady when the world is quiet. The invisible forces Hill described operate with neutrality. They do not reward effort, morality, or intention alone. They respond to harmony between thought, emotion, and action. When these are aligned consistently, outcomes accelerate. When they are fragmented, progress stalls. To make more in 1 year than most make in a lifetime requires eliminating internal contradiction. You cannot think big and act small. You cannot desire wealth and resent responsibility. You cannot seek freedom and avoid discipline. Every contradiction leaks power. This is where many discover an uncomfortable truth. They do not truly want what they claim to want. They want the feeling of having achieved it without enduring the psychological restructuring required. Hill would say, this is self-deception, and self-deception is the most expensive habit a person can maintain. The mind cannot be fooled indefinitely. Eventually, it aligns behavior with true belief, not spoken desire. As the internal structure solidifies, perception begins to change. You notice opportunities others miss. You recognize patterns faster. You respond instead of reacting. This is not magic, it is clarity. Clarity emerges when mental noise is reduced. The disciplined mind sees leverage where the distracted mind sees chaos. This is how time compresses. You stop wasting energy on irrelevant inputs and focus exclusively on actions that move the needle. The year no longer feels like 12 months. It feels like a sequence of decisive moments. Each decision compounds. Each action builds momentum. Each moment of persistence reinforces identity. Hill understood that identity precedes income. You do not earn what you want. You earn what you are prepared to handle. Preparation is not information. It is internal order. By this stage, the external world may still doubt you. That is irrelevant. The internal world no longer does. When self-doubt dissolves, hesitation disappears. When hesitation disappears, speed increases. When speed increases with direction, results multiply. This is the mathematics of mindset Hill revealed long before modern psychology gave it language. The work remains invisible, but its effects are inevitable. The mind you are building now is not designed for survival. It is designed for command. Command of thought, command of emotion, command of decision, command of persistence. And once command is established internally, the external world has no choice but to reorganize around it. At this stage of the journey, the internal transformation has reached a point where the old world begins to feel incompatible. This is not arrogance. It is misalignment. The conversations that once felt normal now feel shallow. The routines that once felt safe now feel suffocating. Napoleon Hill understood that growth creates separation before it creates reward. The individual pursuing uncommon outcomes must exceed PT, a period of psychological isolation, not loneliness, but solitude of thought. When your mind begins to operate at a higher level of intention, the collective noise becomes unbearable. This is the cost of clarity. Most people mistake this phase as confusion. In reality, it is refinement. The mind is shedding excess weight. Opinions that once mattered lose relevance. Emotional reactions that once controlled behavior lose authority. Hill taught that mastery begins when external circumstances lose the power to dictate internal states. This is where self-discipline evolves into self-command. You are no longer forcing yourself to act. You are no longer negotiating with resistance. You are directing yourself with quiet authority. To make more in a single year than most make in an entire lifetime requires an unshakable internal hierarchy. Purpose at the top, discipline beneath it, emotion subordinate to both. The moment emotion takes command, momentum fractures. Emotion is not the enemy, but it must be trained. Hill never suggested suppressing emotion. He taught redirecting it. Desire must be intensified. Fear must be converted into alertness. Anger must be refined into focus. Passion must be disciplined into execution. Raw emotion wastes energy. Directed emotion multiplies it. This is where many encounter an internal crisis. The mind begins to ask, why this much effort? Why this level of intensity? Why not settle for comfort and balance? These questions are not philosophical. They are defensive. The subconscious senses that its old identity is being dismantled completely. It attempts one final negotiation. Hill warned that the greatest enemy of success is not failure, but complacency disguised as wisdom. Comfort presents itself as maturity. In reality, it is stagnation with better language. The truth is uncomfortable. Most people do not fail. They settle. They lower expectations slowly enough to avoid noticing. They exchange potential for predictability and call it peace. The individual who compresses decades of wealth into a single year refuses this exchange. They accept temporary imbalance in pursuit of permanent leverage. This does not mean recklessness. It means precision. Every hour, every decision, every mental rehearsal is aligned with outcome. Faith at this level is no longer emotional. It is structural. It is embedded into behavior. You wake up and act as someone who expects results because your internal systems demand it. Doubt may appear, but it no longer controls direction. Hill described this as the point where belief becomes habit. When belief becomes habit, success becomes boringly inevitable. The drama disappears. The work remains. Autosuggestion now operates below awareness. The internal dialogue has been trained through repetition. The mind no longer questions capability. It questions efficiency. It no longer asks if something can be done. It asks how quickly it can be executed. This shift is subtle but decisive. Most people asking permission from circumstance. The disciplined individual issues instructions to circumstance through action. Fear by now has lost its theatrical power. It still exists, but it is recognized immediately and placed in its proper role. Fear becomes a signal, not a stop sign. It indicates proximity to growth. Hill taught that courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Mastery does not mean elimination. It means obedience has been removed. Fear speaks. Purpose decides. Imagination evolves again here. It becomes strategic foresight. You begin to anticipate challenges before they arise. You mentally rehearse responses to pressure, loss, delay, and sudden opportunity. Opportunity can be as destabilizing as adversity if the mind is not prepared. Sudden success has destroyed more people than gradual failure because their identity could not expand fast enough to contain it. Hill understood this danger. That is why he emphasized self-image and belief before results. You must become internally larger than the outcome you seek. Decision-making becomes ruthless in its simplicity. You no longer entertain unnecessary options. Options create hesitation. Clarity creates speed. Speed, when aligned with purpose, creates compression of time. Hill observed that successful people do not live complicated lives mentally. They live ordered ones. Order does not mean ease. It means clarity of priority. Everything not aligned with purpose is either delegated or eliminated. Persistence now becomes silent. There is no internal cheering, no emotional highs, just execution. Day after day, action after action, adjustment without self-pity. Hill described this state as controlled intensity. It is the most powerful psychological condition a person can occupy. The world may still not see results, but internally, you know you are already past the point of no return. The old life is no longer an option, even if the new one has not fully materialized. The invisible forces governing success respond strongly at this stage. Alignment has reached a threshold. Thought, emotion, and action are no longer contradicting one another. This harmony creates momentum that feels external, but is actually internal consistency expressing itself. Opportunities appear not because the world has changed, but because perception has sharpened. You see leverage where others see risk. You see timing where others see delay. Many people misinterpret this acceleration as luck. Hill rejected this notion completely. Luck is the label given by those who do not understand causation. What looks sudden is usually the result of prolonged invisible preparation. The year where income explodes is almost always preceded by years of mental discipline that no one witnessed. This is why imitation fails. People copy tactics without copying mindset. Tactics without mindset collapse under pressure. As pressure increases, self-discipline must remain absolute. Fatigue will attempt to negotiate. Suck. Cess will attempt to seduce. Recognition will attempt to distract. Hill warned that ego can derail progress as effectively as fear. Pride creates blindness. Blindness creates mistakes. The disciplined mind remains neutral. Praise is acknowledged and released. Criticism is evaluated and released. Neither is allowed to linger. Lingering emotion creates attachment. Attachment creates vulnerability. This is also the stage where ethical clarity becomes essential. Power amplifies character. Money amplifies intent. Hill was clear that success built without integrity collapses inward eventually. Integrity is not moral performance. It is internal consistency. It is doing what aligns with purpose, even when deviation would offer short-term gain. Inconsistency erodes self-trust. Without self-trust, confidence fractures. Without confidence, execution weakens. The mind now operates with a long horizon and immediate action simultaneously. You plan far ahead, but you execute now. You do not wait for perfect conditions. You create them through action. Hill taught that initiative is the force that turns intention into momentum. Initiative thrives in minds trained to decide quickly and persist steadily. At this point, the idea of making more in a single year than most make in a lifetime no longer feels extreme. It feels logical. Not guaranteed, but reasonable given the internal capacity you have built. This is the paradox. What once felt impossible now feels expected. Expectation is powerful. The subconscious moves mountains to meet expectation because it assumes it must. The external world may still lag, but internally you are already living in the future you decided upon. The gap between decision and manifestation is closing. The final phase approaches where pressure intensifies, clarity sharpens, and commitment is tested one last time. This is where outcomes are decided not by chance, but by the totality of internal discipline you have cultivated. As the internal structure reaches maturity, the nature of the battle changes again. The struggle is no longer about starting, believing, or even persisting through uncertainty. It becomes about sustaining intensity when the mind believes the work is already done. Napoleon Hill understood this phase with rare precision. He knew that just before the external breakthrough, the mind often relaxes its grip, not because of weakness, but because it senses proximity to relief. This is where many lose what they were closest to claiming. When the subconscious begins to accept a new identity, it subtly signals completion before reality is caught up. This creates a dangerous illusion of arrival. The disciplined individual must override this signal. Hill would say that this is the moment where desire must be guarded most fiercely, not intensified, but protected. Protected from distraction, from premature celebration, from the erosion of standards. The mind must remain locked on execution even when emotional urgency fades. Most people associate intensity with emotion. That is a misunderstanding. True intensity is structural. It exists regardless of mood. It is built into routine, decision-making, and self-expectation. The individual capable of compressing decades of wealth into a single year has replaced emotional motivation with identity-based obligation. They act not because they feel driven, but because this is who they are now. Hill taught that when identity changes, effort disappears. Action becomes alignment rather than resistance. This stage reveals whether discipline was internalized or merely performed. Performed discipline collapses when no one is watching. Internalized discipline operates regardless of recognition. The world may begin to offer validation now. Early signals of success appear. Opportunities increase. Resources respond. Attention grows. This is not the reward. This is the test. Hill warned that many are ruined by early success because it interrupts the process before it is complete. Partial victory can be more dangerous than total failure. The mind must remain emotionally neutral. Excitement creates carelessness. Carelessness creates error. Error at scale is costly. Hill emphasized that emotional balance is the companion of power. The higher the stakes, the calmer the operator must become. Calm is not indifference, it is control. It is the ability to think clearly when pressure intensifies and consequences expand. Those who earn massive income quickly without emotion. Control often lose it just as quickly. The income outruns the identity. At this level, fear takes its final form. It is no longer fear of failure, it is fear of permanence. The realization begins to form that the old life is truly gone. There is no return to anonymity, simplicity, or small responsibility. This fear rarely feels dramatic. It feels reflective. It asks questions about meaning, balance, and legacy. Hill would recognize this as the moment where purpose must deepen beyond money. Money alone cannot sustain the psychological weight of expanded responsibility. Purpose now becomes stabilizing rather than motivating. It grounds action. It provides context. Without this grounding, wealth becomes hollow and destabilizing. Hill taught that lasting success must be tied to service, creation, or contribution beyond self. Not as charity, but as expression. When income is aligned with purpose larger than ego, it becomes sustainable. When it is not, it becomes corrosive. Imagination now operates as integration. You are no longer imagining becoming someone else. You are imagining how to operate consistently as who you have become. You visualize maintenance, not just achievement. You see yourself making decisions under pressure repeatedly, not just once. This prepares the nervous system for continuity. Continuity is what separates a breakthrough from a legacy. Decision-making becomes almost instantaneous here. There is no internal debate. Values have been clarified. Priorities have been fixed. When a choice presents itself, the correct action is obvious because it either aligns or it does not. Hill observed that indecision disappears when purpose is absolute. Ambiguity only exists where desire is diluted. Absolute desire creates immediate clarity. Persistence now expresses itself as restraint as much as action. Not every opportunity is accepted. Not every path is pursued. Focus becomes ruthless. Energy is conserved and directed. Hill taught that concentration of effort is more powerful than expansion of effort. Many fail at this stage because they attempt to do more rather than do what matters better. Expansion before consolidation leads to collapse. The invisible forces respond with increased speed now. Feedback loops tighten. Actions produce results faster. Mistakes reveal themselves immediately. This acceleration is not chaotic. It is precise. It demands attention. The margin for error shrinks as scale increases. This is why internal order was required first. Without it, acceleration would be destructive. The individual begins to experience a strange, calm confidence, not arrogance, not certainty of outcome, certainty of process. They know that regardless of obstacles, adjustment will occur. This confidence is not emotional. It is mechanical. It comes from having tested oneself repeatedly and observed reliability. Hill would say this is self-trust fully formed. External validation may increase now, but it carries no weight internally. Pride, he does not inflate. Criticism does not deflate. Both are treated as data, not identity. Identity has already been decided. This emotional independence is essential. Dependence on external feedback creates volatility. Volatility destroys consistency. Consistency is the true engine of extraordinary income. As the year progresses, time perception shifts again. Urgency returns, but it is sharpened. There is no panic. There is precision. Every day matters. Every decision compounds. There is a sense that the window is open and must be used fully. Hill taught that opportunity has rhythm. It appears, crescendos, and fades. Those who hesitate miss the peak. Those who are prepared ride it. The work is demanding now, but not exhausting. Exhaustion comes from internal conflict. Conflict has been resolved. Alignment remains. Effort is high, but friction is low. This is the state Hill described as being in harmony with purpose. When harmony exists, energy replenishes itself through action rather than being depleted by it. The idea of failure has lost its emotional charge. Failure is now information, feedback, adjustment. This neutrality toward outcome paradoxically increases the likelihood of success. Fear no longer interferes with execution. Execution improves, results follow. Hill understood that detachment from outcome does not reduce desire, it purifies it. The individual now stands at the edge of manifestation, not because they hope for it, but because the internal conditions you wired for it have been satisfied. The mind is ordered, the emotions are disciplined, the purpose is fixed, the actions are consistent, the identity is stable, the invisible laws have been obeyed long enough to respond. What remains is the final demand Hill always made: total responsibility, no excuses, no attribution to luck or circumstance. Whatever happens next will be owned fully. Success will not be celebrated as fortune. It will be accepted as consequence. This mindset ensures that what is gained can be kept, expanded, and directed with wisdom. The final stretch approaches. The last resistance does not come from doubt, fear, or confusion. It comes from the temptation to relax too early. The disciplined mind does not yield. It understands that the work is not finished until the result is fully realized and stabilized. This is the difference between those who touch greatness briefly and those who claim it permanently. There is a moment when all preparation ends and only truth remains. Not the truth you tell others, not the truth you rehearse privately, but the truth revealed by what you do when there is nothing left to hide behind. Napoleon Hill understood that destiny is not decided by intention, nor by effort, nor even by belief alone, but by the final alignment of thought, emotion, and action under pressure. This is where the inner laws stop teaching and start judging. This is where the mind you have built either commands reality or collapses under its weight. By no W, the illusion of becoming has dissolved. You are no longer preparing to be someone else. You are already operating as the person capable of uncommon outcomes. The question that remains is not whether you can make more in a single year than most make in their entire lifetime. The question is whether you will accept the full responsibility that comes with proving it. Because extraordinary income is not a gift. It is a burden. It demands precision, restraint, courage, and endurance long after the excitement fades. Hill warned that many reach the threshold of success only to retreat at the final moment, not from fear of failure, but from fear of ownership. Ownership of decisions, ownership of consequences, ownership of power. When success becomes inevitable, there is no one left to blame, no excuse left to lean on, no illusion left to protect the ego. You either step forward fully or you betray everything you have built internally. This final phase is where commitment is no longer emotional. It is existential. You are not asking what you want anymore. You are declaring what you will tolerate. You will not tolerate distraction masquerading as opportunity. You will not tolerate comfort masquerading as balance. You will not tolerate hesitation masquerading as wisdom. The standards you enforce now will determine whether this year becomes a footnote or a dividing line in your life. The invisible forces Hill described are already in motion. They do not wait for reassurance. They respond to certainty, expressed through action. If you hesitate now, they recalibrate. If you act now, they accelerate. This is the brutal neutrality of universal law. It does not care about your intentions. It responds to your alignment. You have either aligned yourself with decisive execution or you have not. There is no partial credit at this level. The final resistance will feel deceptively reasonable. It will suggest you slow down, protect what you have built, avoid unnecessary risk. It will remind you of everything you could lose. This voice is not caution. It is the last defense of the old identity that survived by staying small. Hill taught that when fear speaks most persuasively, it must be ignored most decisively. The cost of hesitation now is greater than the cost of bold action. Delay at this stage compounds regret, not safety. You must understand this clearly. 2026 will not reward potential. It will not reward preparation. It will not reward intelligence, effort, or even discipline alone. It will reward commitment expressed without retreat, commitment to decisions that cannot be undone easily, commitment to actions that expose you to judgment, commitment to standards that isolate you from the average, commitment to responsibility that does not permit escape. This is where self-discipline becomes sovereignty. You no longer manage yourself. You command yourself. You wake up and execute because there is no alternative identity available anymore. The old version of you has been dismantled too thoroughly to return. Comfort will no longer satisfy. Average outcomes will feel unbearable. This is not arrogance, it is evolution. Once the mind has expanded, it cannot shrink willingly. Faith now operates without emotion. You do not feel hopeful. You feel resolved. You do not imagine success as a possibility. You accept it as a consequence of sustained alignment. Hill described this state as quiet confidence, the most dangerous form of confidence because it does not announce itself. It moves, it decides, it acts, and it allows results to speak afterward. Imagination now locks onto execution in real time. You see yourself acting decisively before decisions are required. You anticipate pressure and meet it with composure. You no longer romanticize the outcome. You respect the process. Respect for process is what allows wealth to arrive without destroying the person who receives it. Persistence now becomes finality. You are no longer persisting to see if it works. You are persisting because stopping is no longer an option. Hill taught that when quitting is removed as a possibility, the mind becomes extraordinarily resourceful. Solutions appear where none seem to exist. Energy surfaces when fatigue should dominate. Opportunities converge when timing seems impossible. This is not coincidence. It is the mind operating without an exit plan. The FINA. L step is acceptance of total responsibility, not symbolic responsibility, absolute responsibility. Whatever happens next is yours. If you succeed, you will not credit luck. If you stumble, you will not blame circumstance. This ownership creates power because it removes dependency. When you own everything, you control everything that can be controlled. Hill believed this mindset alone separated leaders from followers, creators from consumers, masters from masses. Now the year stands in front of you not as time, but as a test. Not a test of skill, but of resolve. Every day will ask the same question in different forms. Will you act as the person you decided to become, or will you negotiate with the person you promised to leave behind? There will be no dramatic announcements, just quiet moments where decisions must be made quickly and lived with permanently. Understand this with absolute clarity. If you want to make more in 2026 than most people make in their entire life, you must be willing to live unlike most people permanently. Not temporarily, permanently. You must think in decades while acting in days. You must tolerate misunderstanding without explanation. You must accept pressure without complaint. You must execute without applause. You must lead yourself without supervision. This is the price Hill revealed but never softened. There is no shortcut past it. There is no version of extraordinary success that does not demand extraordinary internal discipline. The mind, the T-earns at this level must be trained to command itself under all conditions. You have been building that mind. Now you must use it without hesitation. So here is the demand, not the suggestion. Decide now that this year will not be another rehearsal. Decide that you will not wait for confidence, clarity, or comfort to arrive before you act. Decide that you will enforce your standards daily without negotiation. Decide that when fear speaks, you will move forward. Decide that when fatigue appears, you will persist. Decide that when opportunity presents itself, you will act decisively rather than cautiously. Do not ask if you are ready. Readiness is created through action, not contemplation. Do not ask if it is possible. Possibility is irrelevant to those who decide to act regardless of doubt. Do not ask for permission from circumstances, people, or past experience. Permission is not granted to those who seek it. It is taken by those who decide. This is the moment Napoleon Hill wrote for, studied for, and warned you about. The moment where knowledge ends and responsibility begins. The moment where excuses lose their voice. The moment where you either step into command of your life or remain governed by patterns you already understand too well. Choose now, without drama, without delay, without retreat. Commit to the actions you know must be taken and execute them relentlessly. Accept the isolation, the pressure, the responsibility, and the consequences. Do not look back for validation. Do not look forward for reassurance. Act now with the certainty that alignment creates inevitability. This is not about money. Money is the byproduct. This is about proving to yourself that when you decide, you follow through completely, that you do not abandon yourself when the cost becomes real, that you are capable of sustained discipline at a level most people will never attempt. Make the decision, enforce it daily, persist without negotiation. Take full responsibility for every outcome, and do not stop until the external world has no choice but to reflect the internal command you have claimed.